Today we'll be talking about law of chemical combination, under which we have two laws, that is law of conservation of mass and laws of constant proportion. Now, what is the law of conservation of mass? It states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It remains constant on the universe and it can be transferred from one form into the other. Now, what does this mean? Now, suppose if we are talking about a chemical reaction, then simply if we want to understand, it states that as much the mass of the reactants is there, that same mass will be there of the products. When we write the equation, we write the reactants on left hand side and product on the right hand side. So the mass of the reactants and product will be the same. Suppose we take one example as given in your textbook on page number 32. There is a question. Now in the question it is given that 5.3 grams of sodium carbonate reacts with 6 grams of ethanoic acid. So sodium carbonate and ethanoic acid are reactants. They both are reacting. And the product which is formed gives 2.2 grams of carbon dioxide, 0.9 grams of water and 8.2 grams of sodium ethanoate. Now if you add the reactants on the left hand side and the product on the right hand side, you will get the same mass. You can try this, you can add and see. If you are adding, you are getting 11.3 on the left hand side and 11.3 on right hand side, and this is what we call it as law of conservation of mass. Next we will be seeing law of constant proportion. Now what does this mean? Okay, constant proportion means the proportion of the elements in any compound remains the same. Suppose we take example of water. Water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. Now water, if you take from any place, whether if you take water from lake, if you take water from pond, if you are taking water from sea, if you are taking water from bucket, the proportion of hydrogen and oxygen will remain the same. That is the mass we are talking about. That is, what will be the proportion? The proportion of hydrogen to oxygen will always be 1:8. I am talking about water. Now same elements if you are combining, it can form other compounds also, like hydrogen and oxygen combine in different proportion to form a compound called as hydrogen peroxide. Right? Now there the proportion is different. But water, when we are talking about water from anywhere you take, so in that the proportion of hydrogen and oxygen will always remain constant. So this is what we call it as law of constant proportion. And based on the two laws of chemical combination, John Dalton, British chemist, put forward a theory which came to be known as Dalton's atomic theory. Now, as per this theory, he stated certain postulates. Now, what are these postulates? That quickly we will be seeing. What he said is that all the matter is made up of very tiny particles, and that is atom. Next, what he said is that atoms cannot be divided. This is, we are talking about Dalton. Then lately it was proved that atoms are divisible. But Dalton said that atoms cannot be divided. They are not divisible. Then he also said that any element which is there, so atoms of any element will have the same mass. And atoms of different element will have different mass. For example, if we talk about atoms of hydrogen, then atoms of hydrogen will have same mass. But if we talk about atoms of hydrogen and oxygen, if we compare, so the mass of atoms of hydrogen and the mass of atoms of oxygen will differ. So this is what he said. And he said that they combine in certain proportions, and the relative number and kind of atoms are constant in a given compound, as we talked about water formally, that hydrogen and oxygen combine in same proportion if you are taking it from any place. So these are what are the postulates of Dalton, which you will have to know. So in point wise, you should be knowing these postulates.